It has been 5 years since South African rugby teams left Super Rugby for the URC. In that time frame, many fans, players, coaches and pundits have stated that the absence of the South African teams in Super Rugby and that of the Argentinians has weakened the product and the strength of the national teams respectively. This season, 2025, was a lot more competitive thanks to the removal of the Melbourne Rebels, plus the promise of test jerseys against the incoming British and Irish Lions. The improved performances of Mana Pacifica also helped elevate TV and stadium attendances as the product generally improved. But I noticed something while watching this season's rugby, that there was a gap in the schedule in the URC that would allow Super Rugby teams to come over to South Africa and play, albeit in a limited capacity. How? Let me show you how. Just one note before we begin. The 2025 and 2026 URC fixtures are available, as are the 2026 Six Nations fixtures, which comes into play. But Super Rugby has yet to release their 2026 fixtures as of this recording. So I'm going to be using 2025 and 2024 as a reference point for when Super Rugby starts. So please bear with me in this regard, but both years start relatively within a week or two of each other. The start date of Super Rugby has traditionally been mid to late February, with 2024 starting on February 23rd, whilst this year's competition started on February 14th. The United Rugby Championship, or URC, starts its new season on September 26, 2025. And then it takes a break after round 11 on the weekend of January 30th and 31st. The reason for this is because the Six Nations starts on the 5th of February. So, the URC goes on a hiatus as the European teams are depleted, especially Scotland and Italy, which only have 2 professional domestic sides. There will be one round of URC competition on the weekend of February 27th and 28th during a Six Nations rest week. After the single round of action in February, the competition goes on break again until March 20th. The SA teams have previously used this dead time to either rest or play the other domestic teams of South Africa, or sometimes catching up on fixtures that they delayed on. The current structure of Super Rugby is a 19-week competition with 16 rounds of action. Each team playing 14 games overall, as each team plays 4 home and away derbies. If Super Rugby was to shorten the number of rounds and delay the start of their season, then there is a 3-week window in which they can travel to South Africa for some friendly fixtures. Now, South Africa only has 4 URC teams: the Stormers, Sharks, Bulls and Lions. So I'm going to include the other 4 teams that make up the Currie Cup top tier, which is the Ball and Cavaliers, the Mpumalanga Pumas, the Griquas, and of course, the Free State Cheetahs. So the idea is that the top 8 teams of Super Rugby get to play the top 8 teams of South Africa, so you get rewarded for your form of the previous year. As it's only 3 weeks long, all games would be in South Africa, as that is what people say has been missing for the youngsters. And secondly, the teams would be divided into a like-for-like groups. For example, Super Rugby's top 3 teams of 2025, the Chiefs, Crusaders and Brumbies, will play the top 3 teams of South Africa, which are the Bulls, Stormers and Sharks. Each Super Rugby team playing each URC team over the 3 weeks. The next 3 teams on the Super Rugby log, the Hurricanes, Reds and Blues, would be grouped with the next batch of South African teams, the Lions, Cheetahs and Pumas. Moana Pacifica, the Waratahs and the Highlanders will get the Griquas, the Baldwin Cavaliers, and as a surprise, the top Super Rugby Americas team, the Pampas 15. They get the nod over the actual champion Penarol because they have had previous experience in South Africa playing in the old Vodacom Cup and can be based out of Stellenbosch. The Western Force and the Fijian Drua miss out on the South African safari, but they can perhaps tour South America and play the next best teams of Super Rugby Americas, thus helping to spread the game. Once the 3 weeks are over, the Super Rugby teams will return home and ideally would get a week rest before starting a 15-round Super Rugby tournament that would probably start on the 6th and 7th of March. The South African teams would then go into round 12 of the URC battle tested before getting a 2-week rest before the competition resumes. The second point is player welfare, especially for the South African international players who would be in the middle of a very long season. Included in player welfare is playing in the heat of a South African summer. An alternative is playing in the gap between February and March for just 2 weeks of fixtures. So the South African players get 3 weeks of rest. This, however, will delay the start of Super Rugby. I also want to go back to point 1 on this regard and state that these are friendly games, so coaches can rotate and manage their players accordingly. But there you go, my idea of how we can see the renewal of the old intercontinental regional competition that many grew up watching and fondly remember. Let me know what you think in the comments below.